The crystal chandeliers of the Whitmore Grand Hotel burned bright against the late afternoon, throwing sharp little diamonds of light across a marble floor, polished so clean you could read the fear on a person's face in it. Constance Whitmore had designed that floor herself. She had chosen the stone, the grout lines, the exact angle of the recessed lighting, so that every guest who walked in would feel, for one breath, like they had stepped into something more permanent than their own lives. Today, that same floor was the only thing keeping her alive. She walked through her own lobby with her chin level and her smile fixed, and half a step behind her walked a man named Leon Hale. His hand rested at the small of her back, gentle, almost tender, the way a man guides a partner onto a dance floor. To anyone watching, they were a businesswoman and her associate crossing to a meeting. Nobody watching could see what Leon had told her in the parking garage 40 minutes earlier, in a voice as calm as a weather report. "There's no gun today, Miss Whitmore. Guns are loud. Guns leave holes and questions." He had smiled then, and she would remember that smile for the rest of her life. "There's just a pot of coffee waiting for you upstairs. You'll sign my contract. We'll have a civilized cup together, and by the time your body decides it's had enough, I'll be 3 states away. The coroner will call it a heart attack. Stress. A hard-working CEO who finally worked herself into the ground. Nobody investigates tired women who die at their desks. Poison. That was the whole of it. No blood, no noise, no witnesses. A clean, patient murder, dressed up as a bad Tuesday. And so Constance walked, because there was nothing else to do but walk. She passed the concierge desk, where a janitor was working a mop across the marble, in slow, even strokes. And she did the only thing left, to a woman with a pen in her future, and a grave in it too. She looked down at the floor, not at the man, at his reflection. And in that mirror-bright stone she found his eyes without ever turning her head, and her right hand dropped to her side, fingers already moving, shaping the air between one heartbeat and the next, in a language most people in that lobby would never have recognized. "Don't drink the coffee. It's poisoned. He'll make you drink it too. Don't look up." The mop stopped. Water pooled quietly around the cotton head, spreading in a thin gray sheet across the marble. But the janitor did not lift his face. He did not gasp, did not straighten, did not do a single one of the things a normal man does when a stranger tells him there is death in the building. He just breathed, and then, so slowly, it looked like nothing at all, the mop began to move again. Marcus Ellison had learned a long time ago that invisible men see everything. Before we go any further, this channel is brand new, and every single subscribe is what keeps stories like this one coming. It's free. It takes 1 second, and it means more than you could possibly know. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and let's get back to Marcus, because what he does in the next 90 seconds is going to stay with you. For 3 years, Marcus had worked the day shift at the Whitmore Grand, pushing a gray cleaning cart through lobbies and corridors, wiping down glass no guest ever noticed was smudged, scrubbing floors that 1,000 expensive shoes crossed every day without a single downward glance. He knew the building the way a surgeon knows a body. The faint scuff by the elevator meant somebody had stumbled, usually a man who'd had too much at the lobby bar. The ring of coffee on the business center table meant a deal had gone sideways, and somebody had gripped their cup too hard. Every surface in that hotel told Marcus a small story, and he read all of them, because in a world that looked straight through him, the quality of his work was the only voice he had. But the real reason Marcus noticed everything had a name, and the name was Zuri. His daughter was 7 years old, with a halo of dark curls that never once stayed inside the braids he attempted every morning, and a smile that could fill a room she would never be able to hear. Zuri had been born deaf, And in teaching her how to move through a world built for people who hear, she had accidentally taught her father a completely different way of seeing it. When your child can't hear you call her name across a playground, you learn to watch reflections in windows. You learn to read shadows on walls, to catch the flicker of a shoulder before a person turns, to notice everything a fraction of a second before it happens. Marcus and Zuri had their own language. Real American Sign Language, yes. The kind he'd studied late at night after she went to sleep, sitting on the floor with a borrowed manual and a phone propped against a coffee mug. But also something more private, the shorthand every family invents. A tap on the wrist meant, pay attention. A tug on his own earlobe meant, I love you. A flat palm laid over the heart meant you are safe. Those signs were theirs and nobody else's. A country with a population of 2. Some of the other parents at drop-off offered Marcus a kind of pity he had never asked for, and some of them offered something else. The little tightening around the eyes when a big black man in a maintenance uniform walked into the special education wing holding a small girl's hand, the way a receptionist's smile would drop half a degree, the way a stranger's gaze would slide over him and then snap back, checking, weighing. Marcus had felt that particular look his whole life. Invisible, until somebody decided to be suspicious of him. Then suddenly, the most visible man in the room. He had stopped trying to correct any of it years ago. Zuri didn't need those people to understand her. She needed a father who showed up. A father who learned her language, instead of asking her to shout in his. A father who came home every single night. That morning had started strange, and Marcus had felt the strangeness the way he felt a draft, before he could name its source. The instructions came down from the facility manager with an odd weight to them. The VIP wing needed to be spotless, not clean, spotless. Every member of the maintenance and service staff was told to work fast, work quiet, and keep their eyes down. Don't make eye contact with the guests on 9. Don't ask questions. Don't linger. And there was one more thing, delivered almost as an afterthought. The private lounge outside the 9th floor conference room needed a full coffee service set up before noon and left completely untouched. Nobody was to pour from it. Nobody was to so much as straighten a spoon. It would be handled by the party's own people. Marcus had set that silver pot down himself, on a white cloth, beside 2 porcelain cups, and something about it had made the hair on his arms stand up. He couldn't have told you why, just a service for 2, waiting in an empty room, that no one was allowed to touch. He'd seen Audrey Finn, the head of security, pacing the lobby more than usual, one hand pressed to the earpiece that tied her into the building's nervous system. He'd seen Bridget Louisa, the senior receptionist whose smile could talk an angry billionaire down off a ledge, pull 2 of the bellhops aside and murmur something that made them both go quiet. And near the elevators, Bridget had caught Marcus by the elbow, a thing she had never done in 3 years, and said, low and fast, "We've got a special situation today. Whatever happens, keep your head down and make sure nothing goes wrong." He hadn't known then what wrong was going to mean, but he'd carried the sentence around all morning like a stone in his shoe. There was one more thing that made this day different from every other day, and it was the reason Marcus's heart was already climbing before he ever saw Constance Whitmore sign into a reflection. Zuri's school had lost power at dawn, a blown transformer 2 streets over, and the special education program had closed for the day with 3 hours' notice. Marcus had no one, no family in the city, a late shift he couldn't drop, and a daughter who couldn't be left alone. So he had done the only thing a single father with no options can do. He had brought her to work. She was in the staff break room right now, 4 floors down, coloring at a plastic table with a juice box and a stack of scratch paper, waiting for a father who had promised her, in their private language, palm flat over his heart, that she was safe. "You are safe." He had signed it to her at 11:40 that morning. It was 2:15 now, and there was poison in his building. Constance Whitmore had built an empire on a single principle. That luxury was just another word for control. The Whitmore Grand was the crown of a chain that reached across 12 cities. She had inherited money, sure, but she had earned the respect the hard way, turning tired old buildings into places people flew across oceans to sleep in. She read a quarterly report the way other people read a thriller. She could smell a failing investment 3 years before it fell. She had spent her whole life building walls, beautiful ones, marble ones, between herself and everyone who worked beneath her, because she had always believed that distance was the same thing as safety, that if you stayed above people, nothing they touched could ever reach you. Leon Hale had come to prove her wrong, and he had chosen his weapon to match her world. Not a gun. Guns were for men who broke into places. Leon didn't break in. He was invited. He belonged in a 5-star lobby, the way a shark belongs in warm water. His plan lived in a leather briefcase and a silver coffee pot, and it was elegant, precisely because it left no marks. Inside the briefcase was a contract, already drawn up, already witnessed by signatures that had never touched a real pen. If Constance signed it, controlling interest in everything she had ever built would transfer to a shell company. A company, Leon's employers had made sure, that traced back through so many layers of paper that no honest lawyer would ever reach the bottom. The contract had clauses that triggered on the ink drying, stripping her authority, guaranteeing her removal, and then the coffee would make sure she was never around to fight it. He had chosen the hotel on purpose. Here, surrounded by her own staff, her own legacy, her own reflection in her own marble, Constance would do anything to keep up appearances. You cannot scream in a lobby you spent $40 million to make quiet. You cannot run past a concierge who calls you Miss Whitmore. The hotel that had made her powerful was, this afternoon, the perfect cage. But Leon had missed one thing. He had studied her balance sheets for 3 years, and never once looked at her charity. 3 years earlier, Constance had sponsored a program for deaf children, scholarships, hearing equipment, funding for a special education wing not so different from the one 3 blocks from her own hotel. At the launch, she had sat in the back of a classroom and watched teachers and students hold entire conversations with their hands, their faces, their whole bodies, in a silence that was somehow the loudest room she had ever been in. It moved something in her she didn't have a word for, so she had quietly signed up for a beginner's course, 1 evening a week, learning just enough to greet the students by name and understand a few simple sentences. It had felt, at the time, like a small and slightly embarrassing indulgence. A rich woman, playing at kindness. She had never once imagined it would be the thing that kept her breathing. When she passed the janitor at the concierge desk and saw his reflection resolve in the marble, she made a decision in the space of 3 seconds. She knew this man, not his name. She was ashamed, later, to realize she had never once learned his name, but she knew him. She'd seen him arrive before dawn some mornings, a small girl's hand tucked in his. She'd seen him once in a service corridor, sitting on an overturned bucket, moving his hands slowly through shapes while he studied a dog-eared manual balanced on his knee. If there was a single soul in that lobby who might read a cry for help written in silence, it was him. So she signed it. Don't drink the coffee, it's poisoned. Don't look up. And Marcus Ellison, who had spent 3 years being invisible, went very still and understood that today, his invisibility was about to become the most dangerous thing in the building. Marcus kept mopping. Inside his chest, his heart was slamming so hard he could feel it in his teeth, but his hands stayed steady on the mop handle, drawing the same slow figure 8 across the marble he'd drawn 10,000 times before. That stillness wasn't calm, it was training, and it was the one thing that might keep a woman alive. Because Marcus Ellison had not always been a janitor. Before Zuri, before the braids and the juice boxes and the borrowed sign language manual, there had been a different life. He'd been a combat medic, 2 tours, a field hospital, then a stint as a civilian EMT, working the worst nights a city could throw at a man. He knew the human body the way Constance knew a balance sheet. He knew how fast a poison could move once it hit the bloodstream, knew the difference a minute made, knew that some things could be reversed if you got ahead of them, and some things could not be reversed at all. He knew what a person looked like in the last quiet moments, before their heart decided it had had enough. He had left all of it behind for a reason. His wife, Naya, had gotten sick, cancer, fast and merciless, and by the time the funeral was over, Marcus no longer had the stomach for a job that asked him to stand between other people and death every single night. He'd used up all his courage on a fight he lost in a hospital room. He needed work that let him be home for a little girl who had just lost her mother, and couldn't hear him promise it would be okay. So he'd hung up the medic's bag, put on a maintenance uniform, and made himself invisible. A man who cleaned floors and went home every night. A man nothing could reach. But the training never really leaves. He still clocked the man, who walked with one hand jammed at an unnatural angle in his jacket. He still read exits and sightlines out of reflex, still counted response times, still saw the architecture of violence hiding underneath ordinary rooms. And right now, all of it, the medic and the janitor, the man who knew poison, and the man who knew this building's every corner, was awake at the same time, for the first time in years. He had maybe 90 seconds before Leon walked Constance into that 9th-floor lounge, where a silver pot was waiting. Marcus thought about the ways this could go. If he shouted for security, Leon would know the game was up, and a cornered man who has already chosen murder does not become gentle when he panics. If he ran for the front desk, he'd be a large man in a uniform, sprinting across a lobby full of guests and cameras, and Leon would see it, and Constance would be alone. If he did nothing, if he told himself it wasn't his fight, wasn't his floor to bleed on, he would carry that choice for the rest of his life, and he would have to carry it in front of a daughter he'd taught to never look away from a person in trouble. He thought about Naya, about the last promise she'd asked of him, her hand light as paper in his. Keep our girl safe. Come home every night. And he thought about the other promise, the older one, the one he'd made to himself long before he ever met her. Never stand still while somebody drowns just because the water looks deep. There wasn't time for both promises to win. So Marcus did the thing he was best at in the whole world. He found the third option. He set his mop against the cart, picked up a yellow wet floor sign, and carried it toward the VIP elevator bank, setting it square in Leon and Constance's path. It was nothing, a plastic triangle, 30 seconds of inconvenience. But 30 seconds was 30 seconds, and he needed every one he could steal. Leon frowned at the sign, the way a man frowns at a fly, murmured something about how a hotel this expensive should have its floors dry by now, and steered Constance toward the secondary corridor. His grip tightened on her arm, just slightly. Marcus caught it in the brass of an elevator door and filed it away. The moment they turned the corner, he moved. He didn't go for the front desk. He went for the service closet beside the freight elevator, where a wall phone connected straight to the security office. He dialed the 3-digit extension with a hand that would not shake because he would not let it. Audrey Finn picked up on the first ring. Maintenance. What do you need? This is Marcus Ellison. Day shift. He kept his voice down to a level that wouldn't carry past the closet door. I need you to pull up the VIP route right now, and I need you to stay quiet while I talk. The CEO is in danger. The man walking with her means to kill her. There's no gun. It's poison. There's a coffee service set up in the 9th floor lounge, and nobody's allowed to touch it. That's the weapon. Do not send anybody in loud. Silent only. If he sees uniforms, he'll move fast. There was a pause on the line that lasted exactly 1 second and felt like an hour. Then Audrey's voice came back, and it had changed, flattened out into something cold and professional, and absolutely awake. I've got them on camera. 9th floor, East Corridor. How do you know it's poison, Ellison? How do you know any of this? Because she told me. She told you. There's a man 6 inches from her spine. How exactly did she? Sign language, Marcus said. She signed it to me across the lobby. My daughter's deaf. The CEO learned some, a few years back, for a program she funds. She used it to reach me, because it was the only voice in that room he couldn't hear. The silence on the other end this time was different. Marcus recognized it. It was the sound of a professional, deciding, in real time, whether to bet a life on a stranger's word. Stay on this line, Audrey said. Do not hang up. If this story has its hooks in you already, do me a favor. Take 1 second, hit subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Marcus's shoes with that silver pot sitting on the table. There are a lot more stories exactly like this one, waiting for you right here on Dad Untold Chronicles. Now let's get back to that 9th floor. Marcus heard her speaking fast to someone off the phone. Her words clipped down to the bone. Then she was back. Here's what's going to happen, Audrey said. I'm not sending anybody up that corridor yet. You're right. He'll spook. I'm putting Bridget on the floor to build a diversion in the lobby, so the building looks normal from the inside. I'm staging police 3 blocks out. Silent approach. No lights, no sirens. If that man hears 1 siren, he starts pouring coffee. And I need you to do 2 things for me, Ellison. And I need you to do them exactly. Tell me. 1. That coffee service. If it's still sitting where you left it and he hasn't reached it yet, I need it dealt with. But I need it preserved. If we tip it down a sink, we've got a dead CEO's word against a rich man's lawyers and a pot somebody rinsed. That coffee is the whole case. You understand me? It's evidence. Don't destroy it. Control it. Marcus understood exactly. He'd spent enough time near enough hospitals and enough police to know that a crime you can't prove is a crime that walks. And 2, once it's handled, you become the slowest, most thorough maintenance worker this hotel has ever seen. You give me delays up and down that 9th floor that all look like routine work. Every minute you buy me is a minute closer to doing this without anybody getting hurt. Can you do that? I've been invisible in this building for 3 years, Marcus said. Today, that's going to be worth something. He hung up the wall phone, grabbed his cart, and headed for the service stairs. The elevators were the fast way, but the elevators were also the exposed way, full of cameras Leon might be watching, and mirrors that ran both directions. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, moving quiet even at speed, a big man made light by 3 years of learning where a building's floors creaked. He came out onto 9, through the housekeeping door at the far end of the East Corridor, and what he saw stopped his heart for a full second. The lounge door was open, and a young woman, a service intern, maybe 20, in a crisp Whitmore vest, someone brand new, who hadn't gotten the memo, or had gotten it and forgotten, was standing over the silver pot with an empty cup in her hand, about to pour herself a coffee on her break. Marcus did not run. Running would have made her jump, made her spill, made noise. Instead, he did the thing invisible men are perfect at. He simply appeared, sliding into the room at a bored, unhurried pace, already talking in the flat, apologetic murmur of a man who cleans things for a living. Sorry, miss, Can't touch that one. That's a private setup for the ninth floor party. They flagged it. Don't want it disturbed before their meeting. He reached past her, easy and unbothered, and lifted the whole tray, pot, cups, saucers, out from under her hand. I'll get you a fresh service from the pantry. Give me 2 minutes. The intern blinked, a little embarrassed, said, "Oh yeah, no problem," and drifted back out to the corridor. She never knew. She would find out weeks later, from a detective, exactly how close she had come, and she would have to sit down when she heard it. Marcus carried the tray into the housekeeping alcove, out of the camera's main line, and set it down with the steadiness of a man diffusing something. Then he went to work. From the pantry he took a second silver pot, identical, and a fresh service, and brewed a clean pot of ordinary coffee. He poured a little of it off, weighted it right, set it on the tray so it looked used, so it looked handled, so it looked exactly like the thing that had been sitting there since noon. Then he took the poisoned pot and did the one thing Audrey had told him to do, above everything else. He didn't pour it out. He capped it, sealed it in a clear liner bag from his cart, knotted it, labeled it in his own blocky handwriting with the time and the floor, and locked it in the bottom compartment of the cart, under the cleaning chemicals, a place nobody in that building ever looked, because nobody in that building ever looked at anything Marcus touched. The whole swap took 90 seconds. When it was done, there was a coffee service sitting outside the ninth floor conference room that looked, to Leon Hale, exactly like the murder weapon he had spent 3 years planning around. It just couldn't kill anybody anymore. Marcus carried the clean tray back to the lounge, set it down on its white cloth, precisely where it had been, straightened one spoon, and stepped back into the corridor with his cart. And then, for the benefit of the camera, and the man he knew was somewhere close, he became the most ordinary sight in the world, a maintenance worker on the ninth floor, kneeling by an electrical outlet, unscrewing a cover plate like he was chasing down a wiring fault. Slow, bored, invisible. Down in the security office, 3 floors below the lobby, Audrey Finn watched the whole thing on 4 monitors at once and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She keyed her radio, quiet as a prayer. "Ellison, I saw the swap. That was..." She stopped and started over, because she was not a woman who handed out compliments. "That was good work. 2 clicks if you copy." Marcus reached down to the radio, clipped inside his cart, and pressed the transmit button twice. Click, click. Yes. Audrey had already moved on. She had Ronnie George, the hotel's technology specialist, pulling every camera angle and every timestamp into a locked recording. And she'd told him to do one more thing that would matter more than anyone yet understood. Pull the delivery logs. Every kitchen ticket, every keycard swipe, every service request that had ordered that particular coffee setup to that particular floor. Because somebody inside the Whitmore organization had arranged for a poisoned pot to be waiting in an empty room, and that somebody had left a paper trail, and paper trails don't lie the way people do. Meanwhile, in the lobby, Bridget Louisa was giving the performance of her career. A tour group had just arrived, and she'd turned herself into the warmest, loudest, most gloriously distracting host the Whitmore Grand had ever seen, sweeping bellhops toward luggage, calling out restaurant recommendations, filling the lobby with such ordinary 5-star noise that anyone watching would swear the building was running exactly as it should. It was a wall of normal, built on purpose, brick by brick, so that a man on the 9th floor would never once feel the ground shifting under him. And 4 floors down from all of it, in a quiet break room, a 7-year-old girl with dark curls sat coloring at a plastic table, glancing up now and then at the door, waiting for her father to come back the way he always did. She didn't know about the poison. She didn't know about the man in the good suit, or the woman signing into a marble floor. She only knew that her dad had laid his flat palm over his heart, 3 hours ago, and told her, in the only language that had ever mattered between them, that she was safe. Marcus, kneeling by the outlet with a screwdriver and a hammering heart, thought about that promise, and he made himself a second one. He was going to keep it. He was going to keep both. Inside the 9th-floor conference room, Leon Hale closed the door and gestured Constance toward a chair at a long glass table. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows that gave up the whole city, and on the table sat a leather portfolio he'd arranged there himself that morning, and beside it, carried in a moment ago by a maintenance worker Leon never looked at twice, sat a silver coffee pot and 2 porcelain cups. "Please," Leon said, unbuttoning his jacket and sitting across from her, with the ease of a man closing an ordinary deal. "Sit. Read the contract if it comforts you. The terms aren't negotiable, but I'm not a barbarian. I won't rush a woman's last signature." Constance sat. She pulled the portfolio toward her and opened it, and she began to read. Not because she had the slightest intention of signing, but because every page she turned was another handful of seconds thrown to whoever was coming. 12 pages of dense, poisoned legalese. Each clause designed to strip her of something, and she read every one of them slowly, aloud, asking small clarifying questions, because a woman reading is a woman still breathing. "This will take some time," she said, keeping her voice level even as her hands wanted to shake. "There are 12 pages. Take all the time you like." Leon reached over and, without asking, poured coffee into both cups from the silver pot. The dark stream steamed in the cold light from the windows. He slid one cup across the glass until it rested at her elbow. "We'll have a civilized cup while you finish. I insist." Constance looked at the cup. She looked at the black surface of it, so still it held a tiny reflection of the chandelier above, and she thought about a man on the other side of a door, telling her, "Don't drink the coffee. It's poisoned. He'll make you drink it too." She thought about how easy it would be, how expected, how a refusal might be the very thing that tipped Leon into knowing she knew. She left the cup where it sat and turned another page. Out in the corridor, Marcus watched through the narrow vertical panel of glass beside the door, his body angled so that a decorative mirror on the opposite wall gave him the whole room without him ever looking straight at it. He saw the pot pour. He saw the cup slide across the glass. He saw Constance leave it untouched, and he understood. Clean coffee or not, this had become a game of who blinked first, and if she refused too hard, the man across from her might reach into his jacket for the loud, ugly backup plan Marcus was betting he still carried. Marcus keyed his radio once, softly, a single click. Standing by. Inside, Constance reached the final page, and there she stopped, because there was nothing left to read, and Leon's patience had a floor, and she had just hit it. "Enough," he said, and produced a heavy fountain pen from his breast pocket, setting it on the table between them. "Sign, Miss Whitmore, and then drink your coffee, and then I'll walk out of your beautiful hotel, and this will all be over, one way or the other." Constance picked up the pen. She set the tip against the signature line, and then, because she needed one more minute, and because some stubborn part of her needed to know, she looked up at him. "Before I sign," she said, "answer one question. How did you know about my grandfather's debt? That file was sealed 40 years ago. That information doesn't exist anymore. So how do you have it?" Leon smiled, and it was the smile of a man who could not resist being admired for his work. "Because information never really disappears," he said. "It just gets misfiled. I've been building this for 3 years, Miss Whitmore. Every buried document, every leverage deal your father ever choked on, every skeleton your family paid to bury, I found all of it. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't dig most of it up myself. I had help, somebody close to you, somebody who set your keycard schedules, who told me which rooms had cameras, who arranged for a certain pot of coffee to be waiting in a certain quiet room this afternoon. You built your empire on walls, Miss Whitmore. You never once thought to check who was standing inside them with you. There it was. Constance understood in a single cold rush. Leon was not alone. There was someone in her own organization who had opened every door for him. And if there was inside help, there was a person, and a paper trail, and a coffee order somebody had signed for. Which meant this could be fought, not just survived. Fought, in a courtroom, with evidence, if she could only live long enough to reach one. She picked the pen back up, and beneath the glass table, where Leon couldn't see, she let her left hand fall to her thigh, and her fingers began, very small, to move. Marcus, watching the mirror, saw them go. Help now. Close. He stood. He picked up the metal tool tray off the top of his cart, weighted heavy with screwdrivers and wrenches and a socket set, carried it 2 steps toward the door, and let it fall. The crash was enormous. It hit that quiet 9th floor like a car wreck, and Leon's head snapped around toward the door, his hand already halfway inside his jacket. Marcus dropped to his knees in the corridor and began scooping up tools in a slow, sheepish shuffle, muttering, "Sorry, so sorry," dropped the whole tray, in the voice of a man who cleans up messes, including his own. It bought 5 seconds. 5 seconds was everything. Audrey Finn came around the far corner, with 2 officers, moving on the balls of their feet, no radios, no shouting, and they flowed into position on either side of the conference room door, the way water finds the shape of a thing. Audrey caught Marcus's eye once, a single flick, and held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. She opened the door. Leon spun toward the sound, and his hand came out of his jacket, and there was a backup after all, small and black and ugly, exactly what Marcus had bet on. But before Leon could bring it up and around, 2 things happened at once. The first was that Constance saw Marcus through the open door, and Marcus signed a single sharp word to her, one flat, driving motion of his hand. Down, went down. She threw herself sideways out of the chair and under the glass table, as Leon's arm swung toward the officers, his attention shattering into 3 directions at once. The door, the men, the woman who was suddenly not where she was supposed to be. The second thing was that Ronnie George, watching every camera from the security office, cut the lights in the conference room. The room dropped into black, and in that blackness, the 2 officers, who had come up the stairs wearing low-light gear, because Audrey Finn planned for the dark the way Marcus cleaned floors, thoroughly, invisibly, without being asked, moved with a speed and certainty that Leon, blind and turning and off his balance, could not begin to match. There was a short scuffle, a shout that was more surprise than pain, the flat clack of a weapon hitting the floor and being kicked away. When the lights came back up, Leon Hale was face down on the carpet, with his hands restrained behind him, and Constance Whitmore was climbing out from under her own conference table, alive. He shouted, of course. He shouted about lawyers and lawsuits, and how none of them understood who he worked for. Nobody listened. Audrey read him his rights in a flat, bored voice, while, on the tablet in her hand, Ronnie's footage was already playing. The parking garage, the lobby, the corridor, the pour of the coffee, all of it time-stamped and locked. A complete and unbreakable record from the moment Leon stepped out from behind that concrete pillar. And in the bottom of a maintenance cart, parked 10 feet away, sealed in a knotted liner bag, and labeled in blocky handwriting, sat the one piece of evidence that would turn a rich man's clean, deniable, natural causes murder into something a jury could hold in their hands. The arrest took 17 minutes. Leon was walked out through the service entrance, past the loading dock, past the very spaces where the invisible people of the Whitmore Grand did the work that kept it running, and not one of them looked away from him. If you're still with us this far, then you're part of this story now. You carried it here, right alongside Marcus. So hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us down in the comments which one of Marcus's signs hit you the hardest. The palm over the heart, the tug on the earlobe, or that one flat word that saved a woman's life. Down. We read every single one. This is Dad Untold Chronicles, and we're not done yet. Constance gave her statement in her own office an hour later, her voice steady, though her hands still trembled around the water glass someone had put in them. When the detective asked how she had called for help with an armed man 6 inches from her spine, she told him about the marble floor, about the reflection, about a janitor who studied sign language on an overturned bucket because his daughter couldn't hear him say goodnight. The detective wrote it all down and promised, a little awkwardly, that the maintenance worker would be commended. But a commendation was not what Constance was thinking about. Alone in her office, as the light went gold and then gray over the city, she was thinking about how close she had come to dying inside a building she owned, surrounded by systems she had built, betrayed by walls she had spent her whole life believing would keep her safe. And she was thinking about the fact that the person who saved her was someone she had passed 100 times and never once seen. Someone whose name she had learned only that afternoon. Elias Corbin, the district attorney, arrived the next morning with the first of what would become a mountain. Leon Hale had not been working alone. Constance had known that from his own mouth. He'd been funded by a shell company with organized crime money threaded all the way through it. And he'd had inside help, access codes, keycard schedules, sealed family financial records handed over by someone who worked in the building. And now they had the coffee. The toxicology report came back on the sealed pot within 72 hours. And it did 2 things. It named the poison, and cross-referenced against the delivery logs Ronnie George had pulled, the kitchen ticket, the keycard swipe, the service request that had ordered that setup to that floor. It named the person who had prepared it, a senior vice president, a trusted one, a man who had sat in Constance's meetings for 11 years and sold her out for a number. He was arrested at his home 2 days later. There was, thanks to a janitor who refused to pour evidence down a drain, no version of the story he could tell that the paper didn't contradict. Constance listened to all of it with a calm that surprised her. She had spent her career building walls, and every wall had just been proven to be a door for the right kind of thief. So she thanked Elias, promised full cooperation, and asked him to leave, because she had something else to do first. Marcus was cleaning the 3rd floor when Bridget found him. "The CEO would like to see you," she said, and there was something soft in her professional smile that hadn't been there before. He followed her up to the executive level, walking on carpet so thick his footsteps made no sound at all, and he thought about how he had been up here before, but only after hours, only to empty the trash, only when the people who worked here had gone home and couldn't see him do it. Constance stood when he came in. She gestured to a chair across from her desk, and Marcus sat down carefully, aware that his uniform was still damp at the knees. "I need to thank you," she said, "and I need to apologize, and I'm not sure which one to do first, so I'll do both badly at the same time. You saved my life yesterday. And before yesterday, you worked in my building for 3 years, and I never learned your name. I walked past you 100 times. That is not acceptable to me, and it never should have been." Marcus hadn't done it for thanks. He'd done it because it was right. Because his daughter was 4 floors down, waiting for a father who kept his promises. Because he could not live in a world where he'd stood by a mop and watched a woman die. He said something close to that, quietly. "The detective told me you learned sign language for your daughter," Constance said. "That she's deaf." "Zuri," Marcus said. "She's 7. And she was here yesterday, actually. Her school lost power. She was in the break room the whole time." He hadn't meant to say it, But it came out, and Constance's face did something complicated. The realization that a man had chosen to walk toward danger while his own child sat 4 floors below him, and had done it anyway. When she signed to me, Constance said slowly, "You understood her immediately. You didn't hesitate for a second." "There wasn't time for hesitation," Marcus said. "And I've spent 3 years learning to read the things people don't say out loud. Turns out that's a useful skill." Constance was quiet for a moment. Then she stood and walked to the window, to the city she'd spent her whole life climbing over. "I've been thinking about what happened," she said, "and about what it means. Yesterday, I learned that power is an illusion. The person with the most real control in that building was not the CEO. And it was not the man with the poison. It was the janitor nobody noticed. The one who saw what everyone else missed and acted when it counted. I built an empire on the idea that staying above people keeps you safe. You proved that the only thing that actually keeps you safe is the person standing next to you, deciding you're worth saving." She turned back to him. "So, I'm going to make some changes. Better security, real protection, and real support for the people who keep these buildings alive. And I'm going to start a fund for families raising children with disabilities. Scholarships, therapy, equipment, the things that shouldn't be a luxury, but are. And I would like, if you'll let me, to name it after your daughter, the Zuri Ellison Foundation." Something cracked open in Marcus's chest, quiet and enormous. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," Constance answered. "That's exactly why I'm going to. You learned her language, and because you did, you were able to hear someone who had no other way to be heard. That deserves a name on a building." She sat back down. "And there's one more thing. I want to offer you a job. Director of Employee Safety and Wellness. You'd build the programs that make sure every person who works for me has what they need to be safe and seen. The salary is a great deal more than you make now. The schedule bends around a 7-year-old. Marcus stared at her. "I'm a janitor," he said. "I don't have a degree." "You have something no degree teaches," Constance said. "You know what it feels like to be invisible. You know how to see the people everyone else looks straight through. I have 100 vice presidents who can read a balance sheet. I need one person who can read a room and know who in it is drowning. That's you. That was always you." Marcus thought about medical bills, about the cramped apartment, about the future he wanted for Zuri, and about how real change never comes from the people who've only read about the problem. He thought about Naya, and about a promise made in a hospital room. "I accept," he said. 3 months later, on a cold, bright afternoon in early spring, Constance Whitmore stood in the lobby of the Whitmore Grand, beside a small brass plaque being unveiled near the main entrance. The plaque described a new emergency system, a silent alert protocol that let any employee, anywhere in the building, signal danger without saying a single word out loud. Beneath it hung a second, smaller notice about the hotel's new service standard. Every beverage prepared for a guest was now sealed, logged, and traceable from the kitchen to the cup. The first system had been designed by Marcus and built out by Audrey. The second existed because a man had once sealed a pot of poison in a bag instead of pouring it down a sink. Both were funded by the Zuri Ellison Foundation for children with disabilities. Zuri was there. She stood holding her father's hand, watching the grown-ups gather with curious, patient eyes, not understanding all of it, but understanding the most important part, that her father was being honored, and that this was a good thing. Constance crossed to them and crouched down to the girl's level, and she signed, slowly and carefully, the way you speak a language you love but haven't yet mastered. "Your father is a hero." Zuri's eyes went wide. She looked up at Marcus, who nodded, and then she signed back, quick and matter-of-fact and entirely herself. "I know. He's my dad." Later, after the small crowd had drifted off, Constance found herself standing alone with Marcus, near the concierge desk, on the exact patch of marble where everything had started. The floor still gleamed. It still reflected everything above it. But when Constance looked down now, she didn't just see herself. She saw Marcus standing beside her, equal, necessary, and no longer invisible, in a building that had finally learned his name. "I never thanked you properly," she said. Marcus shook his head. "You thanked me with action. The foundation, the job, those alert systems, those things will be helping people long after both of us are gone. That's the only kind of thank you that lasts." "Still," Constance said. And then she stopped speaking, and instead she raised her hands and signed it. Because some things are truer when you say them in the language that saved your life. "Thank you. You gave me my life back. You changed everything." Marcus signed back, and there was a smile in it. "You gave me a chance to matter. That runs both ways." Across the lobby, Zuri came barreling back from wherever she'd wandered and grabbed her father's hand, tugging him toward the tall glass doors and the cold, bright afternoon beyond them. Marcus lifted his free hand and waved to Constance, and let his daughter pull him away, out into a city full of people living their own invisible lives, her laughter shaking her small shoulders, a sound he would never hear, but had learned, long ago, how to feel. Constance watched them go, and down in the marble beneath her feet, the floor held their reflection for one more moment. A father and his daughter, walking out into the light, before they passed through the doors and were gone. She stood there a while longer, thinking about walls, and about who had been standing inside hers all along, about a cup of coffee she had chosen not to drink, about a language spoken with the hands, and a man who had learned it out of love and used it out of courage, and asked for nothing in return. Then she turned and walked back toward the elevators, past the night shift worker just beginning his rounds, and she stopped, and she looked at him, and she said, "Good evening. What's your name?" Because that, in the end, was the whole lesson of a terrifying afternoon, and everything that came after it. That silence can be a scream for help, that the people you never notice might be the ones who notice everything, and that seeing another person, truly seeing them, is sometimes the only thing standing between a life and the dark. The Whitmore Grand stood tall against the coming night, its windows glowing gold, its floors reflecting everyone who crossed them now. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment, a father sat on the floor with his daughter and taught her a new sign, and learned one from her in return, in the oldest language there is, the one that needs no sound at all.